So tell us any future plans to move on to Washington, D.C. What's happening?
Yeah, no, that won't happen. So people will always say that to me too. They're like, so are you going to try to move up to a higher level? And I always say, no, I'm definitely not. I wouldn't. Part of the thing is I like obviously the legislating and the lawmaking part of my job, but a lot of the things you get to do when you're at this level, you wouldn't get to do if you were at a different level. Like I love the Eagle Scout ceremonies. Like that's something I get to go to because I'm in the community. It keeps me here in the community, or just different events that I get to go to because I'm here. And the higher you go, the kind of the less you're on with the people of your community. And I have never had that desire. I just want to. I love what I do. I just want to do this.
Good. The question I had was Roe v. Wade.
Okay.
Roe. Clarify that.
So I'm glad you're asking that because that seems to be causing a lot of confusion. So very often there's a bill that comes out that has a name that doesn't kind of give the indication of what's in it, all right? So a bill came out in this session and it was, I think it was called a bill to create greater access to reproductive health, I think was the name of the bill. It somehow got the nickname the Roe Act. And the reason that that's significant is that I've heard people say things about we need to pass this so that Roe v. Wade will be the law of the land. So actually Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. But what Roe v. Wade did is it left it to the states to be able to do sort of their public health regulation within the state. What this bill does, that is nicknamed the Roe Act, is it's an interesting bill because if you were to look at it at face value, you'll say, it deletes paragraphs like L through M or L through P, I think, okay? You may not know, unless you go back to the existing law and check what's being taken out, what the real changes are. Because they're not written, they're not saying we're getting rid of this, we're getting rid of that. But here's what they're getting rid of. In a third trimester abortion in Massachusetts, there have been certain regulations that because the baby is potentially viable in the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th month, the belief is only under extreme conditions where it could pose, and I think the words are grave, physical, or mental harm to the mother, all right? In order to make sure they're not being done frivolously in that part of the pregnancy, they also have to report to the Department of Public Health the reasons for which it had to be done in the late term. That is being eliminated. There will be no reporting to the Department of Public Health anymore. If they were done at that point in time, they also had to be done in a hospital setting because there was a greater risk of harm to the mother, as well as if a baby survived an abortion, they had to have then medical care to keep it alive once it's been born. They're taking that out as well. They're also taking out the provision that if in fact the child is born alive, our current law says that all life-saving medical care be given to the child. And people say, well, you shouldn't call it a child, but what I am calling it a child because it's actually born already. Right. So it's not in utero, it's born. So if they're born, despite the abortion, we do everything we can medically to save their lives, and they get probably put in the custody of the state, okay? That's being taken out too. And to me, given the fact that this is, you could do it literally, there's no cutoff date. It could be up till the day you're in labor. So the chances of a child being born alive are so much greater the further into the pregnancy that you get. I just don't know, I just think it's a horrible precedent to say you're not required to give them medical care.
Who thinks up these laws and what party is behind these that particular thing? Where did it originate?
Well, I would say that by and large, with the exception of maybe 2 Republicans, the people that signed on to this bill were Democrats. But having said that, I don't think a lot of people knew exactly what was in it when they signed on
I
to
don't
it.
think so.
No, they didn't. I know they didn't. And part of the reason is what I just told you. If you were to look at the title, it didn't give really a strong indicator. But further, even if you glanced at the bill but you didn't cross-reference it to the older law, you wouldn't really know what was being taken out. And I always say the most important thing about the Roe Act is what is being taken out, not what is being put in. Okay, it's what's being taken out. And it's very, I mean, among the Judiciary Committee, there is not, we have not what they call let it out of committee. We hadn't reported it favorably out of committee yet. I don't know that we will, but it's in sort of a limbo position. And I know people were saying that, oh, because of this, now people won't be able to have an abortion in Massachusetts. And that's just completely false. The law that we have still is there.
Right.
This was going to sort of change the law, and what a lot of us on the committee don't think it's a good way. So
I'm kind of speechless, actually. Yeah.
it is. It's really a shocking bill.
It's very shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not going to give you my position on it.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, as a nurse, I would think,
no.
you know, and it's funny because in the testimony, a lot of healthcare people were there supporting it, and that actually kind of surprised me. But in fact, I asked their keynote speaker for the bill was someone from the Mass Medical Society, and I think she'd been formerly a pediatrician, but she was either president or the vice president of it. And when I said to her, you know, given that, you know, you're representing Mass Medical Society, I said, so you're comfortable with this? You're comfortable with, you know, removing the obligation to provide medical care to a baby born alive? And she's like, I'm not familiar with that provision. And I said, okay, so I read it to her, and she was like, well, I think we want to bring it into modern lexicon and not call it a baby, we want to call it a fetus. And I'm like, but it's already born. And then she kind of looked at the person next to her to take over. But I don't know if they even really fully understood the bill.
Sound it. But you can hold it up in judiciary.
I tried, yeah.
That kind of flows into federal law trumping state law.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless if people thought the Roe bill was different,
Right.
what takes precedence? What do we follow?
Right.
How does that work?
Right. So interestingly enough, with regard to Roe v. Wade, that came into law because of the Supreme Court decision in 1973, I believe. Okay. Even though we did develop regulations through the legislature in order to accommodate how we would allow for abortions in Massachusetts with reporting and those things we just talked about, it still remained on our books as a criminal offense until 2018. It just got changed. And oddly, a lot of the people that were there were saying, well, we need to do it because the Supreme Court is changing and we need to make sure our laws are intact. But for the very same reason that the criminality of our statute didn't matter once the federal law, which would have supremacy over our law, came into place in 1973, they will continue to have that supremacy. And that's not just on the Roe v. Wade issue. It's another big one is safe communities.
Mm-hmm.
It's been called secure communities. It's been called the Trust Act. It's been called a number of different things over the last 10 years. But essentially, and I've actually articulated this in a judiciary hearing to someone from the Civil Liberties Union who was arguing for it, and I said, but if you read the regulation, ICE says that you must do this, and because that's immigration is an issue that is federal, And it's one of those things that they have complete jurisdiction over anything international, immigration, any of that. It's federal. So I said, so you're asking us to create a law that's, the language of our law would be that we are going to disobey federal law. And he's like, well, yeah. And I just can't see how we as a state would make a law that would say we hereby put it in our statutes that we're not going to obey the federal law. It's like,
No.
you can't.
No.
You can't do that. And I know cities and towns have done their own codes, municipal codes, that they are secure communities. I've talked to people in law enforcement in this area, and they haven't even been really faced with this issue before. It hasn't come up to them, but essentially what it is if you are arrested, so it's not if you are found and you are found to be an undocumented alien or a person from outside of the United States. If that's not the criterion upon which the law works. It's if you've been arrested, everyone, and everyone means everyone, from, whether you're a judge or a, municipal worker or work for the courts or everyone would have to be fingerprinted, okay? If that fingerprint hits the database, the ICE database, as a match, they then ask the states to hold the person, and there's a period of time for which they have to hold them. I want to say it might be 72 hours, but I have to go back and look at it again. And that gives ICE the opportunity to decide what they want to do.
Yep.
I don't see any give in that. That is what it is. And unless we are going to secede from the union, we still have to kind of follow the same laws of the supremacy laws. Yeah.
Which it's kind of like funds that are earmarked are designated to go to a place in the state. So if you ask for X amount of funds, you could probably ask all you want. How does that asking of funds really work?
Okay. So with regard to like your municipal funding, it's through, it's actually through a formula. Right? The name of the formula is the cherry sheets, and that's how they basically decide who's going to get what. Okay. What happens every year is we have the budget. Each year we do a budget. It's not per session. It's not a 2-year budget. It's an every year budget. In the budget, you can ask for earmarks. And so if you have a particular need in your community, and I want to say last year the one was the Groton Center, which is the Council on Aging Center, wanted to be able to operate as a shelter during storms for the greater area, okay? They needed to have an emergency generator to do that, and the cost was about $90,000+. So at that point, the rep and then the senator usually work together to make sure that they get the funding for a specific need. There's another type of, looks like funding bills, which are called bond bills, all right? And when a bond bill comes out, people kind of throw in everything but the kitchen sink. But the thing with a bond bill is it doesn't actually mean you've been allocated the money. You've been put in the bond as for something they may give you the money for through the bonding process down the road.
May being the operative word.
And you may never ever get a penny of it, okay? So someone I know always calls it the funny money bill because it's not really a real bill. So sometimes you'll see people putting in everything in the kitchen sink, and especially in the transportation bond bill. My thought is if I have a specific need, and each town, has at a different time had a very specific need that they need me to address. This year, Dunstable has one, so that will be sort of where I will have to put my energies, because we are not in an area demographically based upon the socioeconomic numbers.
Yeah, the demographics.
Right. We don't qualify for a lot of the additional funding that a city or town with a lower socioeconomic median would get. So it's really done by formula. Special things, if somebody has a special thing, and I find out about it through the cities and through the towns, through the managers and the council on aging people and such, they'll tell me their specific need, and I try to always get it. At one point it was Devon's that I got money for their military museum. So every year it's a little something that I have to try to push for, but I don't just go out and ask for money to set aside for no reason. I have to have the reason that I want it, and then try to fight for it. I think the old pick your battles is an important thing to think about, because you can't just throw everything at it and think I'm going to get everything. You've got to decide to really fight for the one or two things you really have to get.
And so this coming term or whatever, what do you see as your big fights?
This coming term, I think the biggest fight is going to have to do with money, but I think it's going to be basically because of the deficiency of revenue coming in. So when I said this year wasn't too bad, it's because of the fact that a lot of this year's revenue came from last year. So I remember they were waiting for the last week you could pay your taxes. I forget what day it was, maybe July 15th. And they were saying that they did anticipate good revenue coming in then, because they believed everybody who was getting money back filed by April 15th. So the people that were waiting, more likely than not owe. So there was money that was owed then. Our July numbers were not horrible, and our August numbers, actually, revenue numbers for August were greater than last August for some reason. So there's some kind of weird dynamic. We're not always sure why it happens. But next year is when I think we're really going to see the problems, and the big part is the unemployment too.
Not to interrupt, but
yeah,
I am going to interrupt.
Okay.
Just the Family Leave Act, is that budget gonna be affected? Because I know when that came, there was a lot of, wow, that's really great.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, it might not be coming out so great.
Well, that's an interesting thing that you say that. That is due to be implemented at the same time as we would be deciding on what's going to happen with the employer-paid unemployment tax. And right now they're anticipating a 60% increase. So if you have a 60% increase in the unemployment tax for employers, plus the family medical leave, that's gonna be a hardship. And we're always trying to balance you want to make sure everybody's rights and interests are protected. But there are certain things, if you do one thing, the greater harm you're going to cause on the other end. It doesn't matter. And then certain decisions have to be made in a bad time. And like, for instance, this year, when it was very obvious that we were going to be entering into an economic downturn, and we passed the climate bill. Part of the climate bill, people would argue, imposes a slight tax increase on gas, which I've opposed all through the years I've been there. But I didn't, I voted for the bill, and the reason being that you had to weigh it. I mean, gas prices are lower right now. People are driving less generally than they were last year. And the money's going to come from somewhere, and that's really, I was reading today on my State House email about an odd shift in cigarette taxes, because we made flavored cigarettes illegal to be sold in Massachusetts last year. Well, especially, I think you could appreciate here in Pepperell, what does that do for us? It makes people go over the line to Hollis or Brookline or Nashua or wherever, and so where they can get the kind of cigarettes they want. And so it caused a huge deficiency in the revenue that we used to get through what they call the cigarette stamp tax, I think they call it. But so everything has a consequence. I mean, they believe they would save more lives, and hopefully that would be true. But on the other hand, you do create a deficit in the revenue.
So are the pot sales as great as everyone thought they were gonna be?
Well,
Or is it better?
yeah, well, here's the thing. For quite some time, though, this year, they were shut down.
Mhm.
So, a lot of the, same with the casinos, the meals taxes that you would get at restaurants, alcohol bars, everything. So, if you take out hotels and events and conferences and casinos and marijuana shops and all of this, and you look at what we didn't earn in 2020, it sort of paints the picture for 2021, and that's kind of scary right now. So it's gonna not be a year like I was reminded of that song that you can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you get what you need. I think this year is we're gonna have to just get what we need.
Yeah, it seems like you're gonna have a lot more challenges.
Yeah.
Because the budget has to be balanced, right? You can't.
Oh yeah, so
That's a law.
Right. I always say, we don't print our own money,
Yeah.
like the feds do. So
Mm-hmm.
it's part of our Constitution. It absolutely has to balance Massachusetts. We can't spend more than we have. Now, we did come into this with a pretty good rainy day fund, which is good. We also came into this, we ended up borrowing some money for cash flow based upon knowledge that we were going to get certain monies from the federal government. And I know at least one big borrow, we've already paid it back from the spring. So I think we're trying to, I think we have a great governor. Thank God we had the governor we had during this crisis, because I think he handled it incredibly well.
He handled it pretty well.
Yeah, he did.
I didn't find any real complaints. I
No.
didn't have any.
No.
And others
No,
did.
I
But
know.
you're all right.
Well, there are people that
Yeah,
think,
but-
he didn't open things up fast enough, and there's always concerns about that. But you're really between a rock and a hard place,
Yeah,
because,
it was a whole new thing.
right, and he would err on the side of caution, which I think you have to do. You do have to do that. So,
Sandy, do you have any?
Could you explain the 60% increase in the employer tax?
yeah, well, because basically what happens now is that when an employer has an employee, there's a certain amount of the tax that goes to the unemployment tax.
Mm-hmm.
That then goes into an unemployment trust fund, which the state then uses to pay out the unemployment. Because we've experienced unemployment now, I think they said unparalleled since the Great Depression. You have a situation in which what we took out of people's paychecks based upon our projections of how many people may have to go out on unemployment were seriously under what we, in fact, even just doing the processing of our unemployment cases, we had to take up state employees from other divisions of the state and have them all work in unemployment because everyone was going out on unemployment. So that plus the fact that under the last federal unemployment extension, part of the stimulus extension or supplement extension, we're required to pay a portion of that now too, of that increase. So you're asking to pay more than our guidelines require us to, and with less money coming in to cover it. So I worry because I don't want to see a really horrible breakdown in our economy, and I don't want to hit our small businesses so hard that they can't survive.
Yeah, it seems like 2021 might be more of a challenge than
I actually
2020.
think it will be. I do. I think
Yeah.
it will be. I think people will be starting to go back to normal life. Hopefully next year it will be a little more normal. But I do think financially we're looking at a much more difficult budget season.
I don't really have any
No.
more questions. I don't know if the girl behind the camera does.
No, I'm good.
You're all
Yep,
set.
good.
So Sheila, what do you want to say? The floor is yours. What do you want to add?
So, well, I guess, I've been asked a lot of different questions from people that they're hearing or seeing certain things. And one of the questions that people have asked me about recently has to do with my attendance record.
Oh,
So this, as I said, we do 2-year sessions, okay? So this session, I haven't missed any roll calls in 2020, but because of personal reasons, a family member's health situation in 2019 and a death in the family in 2019, I missed 3 days in 2019. And because I missed them, they were ones that we took a lot of roll calls. So I put my rate down pretty low for this session. I've only made 94% of the roll calls. But I, just for my own edification, and I didn't go all the way back to 2011, but just using the 2 prior, my attendance was over 99% for roll
That's a
calls.
pretty good
Yeah,
attendance.
for both of those sessions.
I don't know if most of us could say that.
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing is when I looked at it, in one of them I had 4 roll calls I'd missed, but 2 of the roll calls were because they were quorum roll calls. And so quorum roll calls are roll calls just to get people into the room. So it's not on a bill or an amendment or a law or anything like that. It's just like a roll call attendance, all right? Every other bill that we do, you can, run up to the chamber, and if they've closed the roll call, you can still vote. In a quorum, you can't. So oftentimes I've been in the building, and especially like if I'm in a judiciary hearing in the other end of the building, I find it very wrong, in my opinion, if somebody is testifying to the Judiciary Committee, somebody who maybe has driven hours to get there, waited hours to talk, and sometimes on a very emotional issue or whatnot, I just get embarrassed if everybody gets up and leaves, like in the middle of their testimony. And so often I stay and wait for somebody else, the other Republican on the committee, to come back, and then I go to vote, and I miss the roll call.
But that seems like a problem with the State House,
With
not
procedure,
with you.
procedures,
And
yeah.
especially now that there's remote, and if a person has 2 weeks, or now votes can be counted within a 2-week period.
Right.
It does seem like that's a systems issue,
Yeah.
not necessarily
Well, I think it is, and I brought it up a couple of times
issue.
because I don't think it's fair to the people of the Commonwealth if we just up and walk away from them.
Yeah.
And especially if it's a quorum. If I get there late and it's another kind of bill, they just put my vote on. But if I have to run through the building and I miss a quorum, I'm still out of luck because they don't let you vote late on a quorum.
Yeah, that does. See, I think it's a systems
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
And
I do
especially
too.
electronically today,
Right.
that could be solved.
Right. Because
And
when
then
I
it
was
would be
looking,
a
I was
dead
like,
issue.
I would look at them. I'm like, why did I miss that? And then I'd see it was a quorum. And then a lot of times you would see next to me late, which means I probably was in a meeting or
Yeah.
hearing or something, and it had to keep running up.
Yeah. It might be one of those issues that needs to go away. Like
Yeah.
there's more important
That's
things
what I'm
to
hoping,
be talking about.
But my
Yeah.
record just at least,
Yeah.
I haven't finished 2020 either, so maybe it will go up from the 94%, but it was 99%, more than 99% the last 2 sessions. So
I don't know. I would say that's pretty good.
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's okay.
I think it is.
Yeah, and unfortunately, everyone sometimes has a year where a
Well,
family
life
member
gets in
needs
the
more
way.
medical
And
Yeah.
actually, if you have a phone and you have a way to vote,
But they didn't allow us to do that
Yeah,
before.
maybe they have to
Maybe they will
change.
now because
Yeah.
we've learned how to do it remotely.
yeah.
They might.
Yeah.
That would help a lot. It would be, it really would be so much better all around for people coming to testify if that's the
Yeah, I
case.
think it would be. I think if I was
Yeah.
a citizen testifying or whatever, I'd be upset if you get up and left.
Oh yeah.
Kind of
Well, and you
between
have
a rock
to.
and a hard spot.
Yeah, and some of these people, I've had hearings that have gone on for more than 12. I've had hearings that have gone on after midnight. They're still going on, and you have people that have waited sometimes all day to have their say. And not that we would have a roll call at midnight, but we wait till every last person who wants to be heard is heard. So.
See, I totally wasn't even going to ask that question.
Well, yeah, no,
It seemed like
I've heard people like, what about your voting record? And it kind of floored me because it's never been an issue, but I did, last year was a rough one, and in fact, at one point, my husband, we had to go out of state for his medical care, so it was a little hard. It happens.
It does happen. Okay, I don't have any more questions. Do you have anything else to add?
I can't think of anything.
Good. It was great. Sheila
Yeah,
Harrington.
Sheila Harrington,
Remember
2020.
to vote November
Yes,
3rd.
please, I need your vote.
Yes.
Please
Yeah.
vote.